Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated.
Hey folks, this is Jason Pye. Welcome to another episode of Peach Pundit, the podcast. Apparently I can't talk today. I am talking to my good friends Buzz Brockway and my lesser good friend Scot Turner today. We're here to talk about Georgia politics and national politics. And believe me, folks, we got some shit for y'all today.
I'll just point out that this morning, if any of you follow Comfortably Smug on Twitter, he routinely tweets out in the morning, today is going to be an insane day. And he was right. Today he was right.
Yeah, you're if you're a first-time listener of Peach Pundit Podcast, I'm sure you came here to learn about Colton Moore and how Colton Moore today went to jail. And we're going to talk about that. I have a lot to say. I have so much to say. And
we got to pay some bills before we get to it.
Just you wait. You sit right there, dear listener. We got something for you.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
All right, so the Georgia General Assembly is back in full swing. We already have a sine die date, which is the earliest I've ever seen in more than 20 years of watching the Georgia General Assembly.
This is the second time in 4 years that they've done this, where the first adjournment resolution was the only. And I love it, because then that means I can plan the entire spring and summer.
So we're getting a sense of some of the priorities for this year. It looks like taxpayers might not have to hide their wallets, at least this year and maybe next year. So Scott, tell us. I know Speaker Burns has already offered a look at his priorities, and then we have Governor Kemp at the State of the State address and all manner of things to discuss.
Yeah, I used to have an office that looked out of the Capitol, and there was a tree right outside my window, and I would joke that so long as there were leaves on that tree, your wallet was safe. But the moment those leaves fell off, you should go bury your wallet and keep it buried until the leaves grew back, because during legislative session in the winter months, it was always in peril. And Speaker Burns did start out the week before session started by listing his legislative priorities. Now, this isn't every legislator's priorities, but this is where the speaker would like to see specific pieces of legislation introduced. And the first was school safety. The second was protecting girls' sports. No transgendered boys in girls' sports in Georgia. Increasing literacy initiatives. Codifying protections for in vitro fertilization. Hurricane relief. Increase access to maternal and infant health care, which we'll talk about some later in one of our other topics. Bolster Georgia's healthcare workforce. Increase income tax rate deductions and provide $1 billion in tax rebates. It's a pretty ambitious agenda. You don't usually see the speaker. Did Speaker Ralston used to do this, where he would like a whole package of things?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, from time to time, he would say, I want to get this done or that done, but it wasn't the whole agenda.
Yeah, I think whatever you heard at the Eggs and Issues breakfast was usually, so basically whatever the Georgia Chamber of Commerce wanted was Speaker Ralston's agenda.
Right. And so what was interesting is at the Eggs and Issues breakfast, the speaker talked about professional license reform, which is not on his list here, unless it has to, it's can be folded into any one of these, really, especially around the healthcare workforce stuff. That was something he didn't previously talk about. And I know Buzz and I share a passion about that.
Yes.
I mean, for the most part, I would say here that the list of issues, I would say most of them are these are meat and potatoes issues. Most of them, at least. There's minimal culture war stuff. There is some on here. It's a little bit of punching down, but otherwise, like, some of this stuff is, I mean, everybody's concerned about school safety. Everybody's concerned about education. Obviously, hurricane relief, and I think that's an even greater focus now. What's going on in California? Our thoughts to everybody. I actually know people who are in that area. One person who's been evacuated from his home, and that's scary stuff. Healthcare, huge issue, always will be a huge issue. So, Buzz, there's a lot of meat and potato stuff here.
Yeah, and I think, interestingly enough, there's some, between the speaker, Lieutenant Governor Jones kind of really only announced like one thing.
Girls sports.
And of course that coincides with one of the speaker's items. But, you compare what Speaker Burns said with, say, some of the stuff that Governor Kemp outlined in his State of the State today, and there's a lot of overlap. So I think that's a pretty good indication that some of those things will get done, including Governor Kemp added that he was going to accelerate the tax cuts, so we're going to get another income tax cut down to 5.2%. So keeps creeping down.
Yeah, saw the press release from Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones's office. His number one priority, given by the bill number SB1, no boys and girls sports. Recently, I was talking about this with my barber on, was it Monday, Tuesday? Yesterday. See, yesterday was Wednesday. I've lost track of days. This has been kind of a crazy week. We were talking, this came up because we had an issue in Chesterfield County related to this recently. The boys and girls sports thing, it came up. And I said, the president of the Indian testified before Congress on this recently, and he was asked to give a number of boys, trans women who play girls sports. The answer was single digits. It was fewer than 10. And we've discussed this back and forth on the podcast. Has there been a number identified in Georgia to make this like some big thing where there's actually a need for legislation?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think I guess what I thought they already decided this. They told the Georgia High School Sports Association to craft a policy, which they did. I don't know. I mean, I understand. I think I was talking this yesterday or Tuesday rather, with a Democratic member of the House about this. And we've talked about it on the podcast at various times. Americans are very concerned. I think why this whole issue is such an issue. Americans are very concerned about level playing fields in sports, and when they feel like there's not a level playing field, that's when folks have problems. Yeah, and that's what makes it a potent issue.
That's why I don't think Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. He cheated.
Yes.
But I'm also aware that if you're a trans woman and you're taking hormone therapy, things like that, you lose muscle mass, you lose the genetic advantages that men typically have. Now, I don't want to go into a whole scientific debate. That's not the intent of what I'm saying.
I guess,
what I'm saying, and I think what I'm trying to parlay into, and Buzz and Scott, I would love to hear both your feedback on this, is I know the culture war, at least some elements of it are potent for Republicans, this being probably the most prominent, probably the most potent, because they've lost on same-sex marriage, and they've won, at least in court cases, on abortion, but public opinion isn't with Republicans on abortion.
Used to be, but it's turned on us. And stunningly, the pro-life movement is, so seem to have conceded. All right, well, let's go ahead and put the most pro-choice guy as head of HHS, and everybody's fine with that. So,
my point before you guys answer, my point on this is this: Burt Jones is running for governor, and I'm curious at a time when, particularly when we expect, the three of us, I think, expect prices to continue to go up, largely self-induced pain. Wouldn't it be more wise to focus on like the economic issues Georgians care about, which is affordability? And
I think you might be underestimating how much Georgians care about this issue. They do. They care deeply about it. It's one of the reasons why Trump went from 11,780 margin of defeat to 108,000 margin of victory 4 years later in Georgia. But the original question that you asked to Buzz is, what has changed, essentially, to paraphrase, from when they took action to tell the Georgia High School Association to institute policies banning biological males from participating in girls' sports. And what happened was, over the summer, there was a Senate Special Committee on the Protection of Women's Sports, which Lieutenant Governor Jones created and appointed members to. And we wrote a little bit about some of the things that we heard out of that committee. I watched a couple of the hearings. This is not an issue that I am personally super passionate about. However, I understand why people are. And if my daughter was in athletics, I would probably be far more fired up about it. What some of the things that came to light, specifically around when Riley Gaines and some of the other collegiate swimmers came, they attacked Georgia Tech during their testimony, saying that there was a biological male with a penis exposed in their face,
right,
in the locker room.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
And that testimony happened over the summer. That was very powerful. It was one of the most visited pieces that we have published on Peach Pundit in 2024, and it resonates with people. And that story was horrifying to hear it from the perspective of these female swimmers, because they weren't expecting it. Nobody told them this was going to happen. And I'm in the camp of, I don't think that was Georgia Tech's fault. That was the NCAA's fault. Georgia Tech didn't have staff for that. It was staffed by the NCAA, and they made these policy decisions without informing the women of the other competitors what it was going to be happening, and they didn't offer alternatives. And one of the things that the bill does is it requires alternative male-female dressing rooms. And so that is one of the thrusts of the bill, that is, to answer your original question, what is new, what's changed, why is this an issue? They heard testimony that has driven them to write a bill. And it will be carried by Senator Greg Dolezal from Forsyth County.
That particular example, if that was all the bill did, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because the swimmers who were in that locker room, accommodation should have been made for the transgender woman to go somewhere else, to be somewhere else. That was a huge mistake on the NCAA's part. No disagreement there. That being said, it seems to me this issue's been blown far out of proportion, and it's because it's politically charged. But you would think every child,
But I think, in fairness, Jason, I think the speaker outlined a long issue. I'm scrolling through the post, a long post. That's one item. It's not the whole agenda. It's not, you haven't really heard Governor, I don't think I've heard Governor Kemp say anything about it. I don't know, it's a big deal in the Senate, and obviously, and yeah, there's no doubt there's politics. There's, shocking news. There's politics in politics.
Right.
I don't think it will attract a lot of attention. Of course it will. It will draw lots of media coverage. There will be lots of folks on all sides of this issue will be at the Capitol, and there'll probably be other pieces of legislation introduced. But I think it's one piece of a broader agenda, and I think for the most part, it's doing, I think, what we all want it to do. It's focused on policy and focus on some of its pretty important policy.
Yeah.
So
well, let's go into some of the policy, a lot of the policy, because granted, Brian Kemp is in his last term. He's a lame duck, but he gave the State of the State address yesterday.
Today. Yep,
today.
this morning.
Excuse me, today. Yeah. So that's right. It
will come up in another topic later.
We have things to discuss. Yes, it was today. But no, he's outlined priorities for the 2025 session, which is going to be, as we all know, very active. Buzz, tell us what's on the governor's mind.
Yeah, Governor mentioned several things. They are going to, and I doubt there's any disagreement in the legislature, help out folks who were devastated by Hurricane Helene in the state of Georgia and other natural disasters. That will be taken care of, and they've got the money to do it. Excuse me. I mentioned already, the governor announced he wants to see the income tax reduced down to 5.2%. He mentioned some other things. I wrote a post about something that he highlighted the other day and he mentioned it again briefly in his State of the State: increased spending on school safety, also increased spending for K through 12 transportation, which is a constant source of pain for local school districts because it's daggum expensive to haul kids all over the county to get them to school. So that will help the school systems. But to me, I think that, the governor has hinted at this, and he touched on it briefly during his Eggs and Issues, but he spent a lot of time talking about tort reform, the need for it, and why he's for it, and why the business community is behind him, and urged Democrats to join with him, and talking about things like housing prices and the cost of insurance that regular folks have to pay, not just wealthy business people have to pay, are impacted by. So I think that will be, it won't be easy because there's powerful folks against that, but he really called for Democrats to work with him and try to get something done on that front. So,
Scott, what are your takeaways?
Tort reform. That's all I heard for the several days leading up. So much so that the governor's floor leaders were ready and willing to just go run through a wall for tort reform, but I don't think anybody knew what was in the bill. Like, there hasn't been a bill yet.
right.
And so I was talking with some of the lobbyists who keep an eye on this, and everybody's waiting for the details. How deep and wide is it going to go? Is it going to be just for healthcare? Is it going to be for other types of tort? It's sucking a lot of the air out of the room for a lot of these other policy initiatives, so much so that during the State of the State, the governor threatened that if he didn't get a tort reform bill, he would call a special session after sine die.
Oh, wow.
It's that important to him. And so Governor Kemp enjoys a great deal of popularity amongst the majority caucuses and some popularity amongst the Democrats for the way he's handled himself in office on certain issues. We'll see what he can do here. Obviously, there are special interests aligned to fight that. There are trial lawyers. I wonder, I can speculate that from my own experience, that they're not going to be very fond of anything that puts an unreasonable cap on what they can get in compensation out of any type of legal action. So
yeah, the tort reform issue is one that, on its face, I've never really had a problem with. I remember this has been years ago. Back when I listened to right-wing radio, I would hear Neil Bortz talk about, because there was tort reform happening, and I can't remember if it was in Congress or Georgia that they were trying to.
Georgia, yeah.
And he blasted the hell out of it.
Yeah, it got ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah,
it was passed, signed into law, and then struck down by the state Supreme Court.
Yeah,
And you know who led the opposition to that? A friend of the podcast, Ed Lindsay.
What was the reasoning? What was the reasoning behind the unconstitutionality of it?
It was a cap on your ability to seek due process. And he voted against it, spoke against it, voted against it as a legislator. And if you ask Ed Lindsay about that today, he'll tell you it was one of those instances where he tried to tell everybody he was right at the time, and nobody was listening.
Oh, yeah, and in the chat we have someone who says, "I agree with Ed."
So we have a Patreon in the chat. If you want to be a Patreon, head on to patreon.com/Peach Pundit. Sign up at the $10 level, and you can join our friend Ryan in there, who is an attorney.
Smooth segue there, Mr. Publisher. Smooth segue.
Yeah.
It was a very smooth segue, and I would actually, and I'm not an attorney, although I work for attorneys. Thank you, Ryan. I wasn't sure if I could say your name. So I would agree with that cap. I would agree with that cap being unconstitutional. I do think there has to be you have to address this in some way, because we're talking about ambulance chasers and many of these instances. Certainly not
Eric
most.
Erickson had this take on Twitter. He said they need to stop calling it tort reform because nobody knows what a tort is. They need to call it ambulance chaser reform.
Yes. We just need the approach needs to be thoughtful. That's what it needs to be.
Yes.
You need to look out for abusive practices. Then that's the end of it. But Scott has an early candidate for president in 2028, and I frankly said why, because Chesterfield County just started doing this where I live in Virginia. Chesterfield County just started doing this, and I don't often go to Reagan school. I take Reagan to the bus stop. I drop her off on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Pick her up. So I don't have to go through a school speed zone, thankfully. That being said, they're doing this stupid shit. It pisses me off because it's clearly a money grab. So Georgia, Dale Washburn he represents Georgia House District 144. He wants to ban school speed zone cameras, and you know what? With you, brother. Do it.
I'm ready to nominate him for president of the United States.
Run for Congress. Introduce that bill. I'll donate to your campaign just on that issue alone.
Yeah,
There's a federalism issue there, but I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I took the opportunity this week to visit with Representative Washburn to let him know that I would do whatever it took to help him, either as a personal or professional capacity. I'm so excited for this. The speed cameras used in school zones have been abused throughout the state. And in the city of Woodstock, for example, they were writing tickets and sending tickets to people that were driving through the school zone at 8 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. These people were, when the flashing light was not on, it was not school hours, it wasn't school zone hours, they were getting tickets for driving 35 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour school zone. The worst part of the way the law is drafted today is it's not a criminal penalty. You don't get a day in court. It's signed off on by somebody. We don't know exactly who. We're told that a member of the local government has to do it. But our friend Ryan, who's in the chat, texted this to me today. I'm going to read it because this is a fascinating example of how bad the system is. He says, I received a notice on August 9th of 2021 from the Georgia Department of Revenue that my title and registration was on an administrative hold due to a speeding violation allegedly captured on camera in Emerson, Georgia. Having never been to Emerson, he had to Google it to see where it was located. And he says, I've never actually been to Bartow County. Ryan's from South Georgia, nor received an initial ticket. And this surprised him. He says, I called Emerson Police Department and Blue Line Solutions, LLC, and they had zero record of it. I called the Georgia Department of Revenue and was told that it was definitely authorized by Blue Line, and the hold was still on his title for his car. So I was stuck with a hold on my tag and no way to take care of it. Mind you, I was born in October, so I had 2 months to get this taken care of. I also asked you the copy of the sworn affidavit of the arresting officer because I wanted to pursue a perjury charge. I was told by the Department of Revenue, the Blue Line Solutions, and Emerson PD that I wasn't allowed to see it at this point. Let me restate that. Someone who signed an affidavit under the pains and penalties of perjury couldn't be prosecuted, and the evidence apparently was destroyed or never existed. I also got a tag hold notice for a speeding camera citation in Bloomingdale, Georgia. I was able to pull the camera on it, but there was no way to contest it at this point, and I couldn't even pay the fine if I wanted to. The website didn't work. The police department couldn't take a payment. I was told by Blue Line that I'd have to pay the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Revenue told me I needed to pay Blue Line. Bottom line, I was never served any kind of notice for this violation initially. I later came to find out that neither of these initial violations were sent to an actual address. They sent it to a previous place that I lived 2 years prior, and I immediately changed all of my information with the Department of Revenue when I moved, but didn't include an apartment number. So it got sent back because that actual address does not exist. I was told that they pulled that information from GCIC, which is highly inaccurate. Thankfully, Representative Dominic LaRicchia helped me out by contacting the DOR commissioner and getting the holds removed, and the judge in Bloomingdale, whom I know, dismissed it. There's no actual proof of service requirement. It's literally just take my word for it. They don't even provide a copy of the first-class letter they supposedly sent. And this is a huge issue. It's a due process issue. It's a do you want to be filmed everywhere you go issue? Is that the type of society you want to live in? Or it's a freedom issue. It's a basic liberty issue. And it's got major due process problems.
Does Representative Washburn's bill address the school bus cameras? About that as soon as they flash yellow, you better slam on your brakes or you're getting a ticket.
No, I don't think so.
And the fine now is $1,000.
Jesus.
On the first offense, $1,000.
The thing about this
again,
one
an out-of-state company. I know because my mom got nailed. It kind of a shadowy. If she wasn't going to Australia for a time, we'd probably show up at court and try to fight it because there were roundabouts involved, and somehow the school bus nailed her on that. But
so from it's
an out-of-state company, and you there's no way to contest this unless you show up at court and hope spend a day hoping that the judge will be in a good mood.
So from the WMAZ story, there's a quote by Brooke Shear. She said she felt frustrated when she got a ticket from a school zone camera outside of school time for $100. And this is her quote. I thought it was odd because I was like, the lights weren't flashing, but I guess I was like 1 mile above the allotted speed zone, and I still got tickets. So that's a bummer. The lights were flashing. She still got hit with a ticket. Now, DC has the red light cameras, which I arguably hate even more because I've gotten nailed on one of those. There's one a couple blocks from the house office buildings that I always have to be on the watch out for. So I got nailed by that. And then I also got nailed on, I think, 8th Street going, I don't know, 10 miles over the speed limit, 12 miles over the speed limit. And yeah, like I hate those I hate those too, but the red light ones are even worse. But this is dumb, and you're doing it because of the bottom line. The WMAZ story it cites two different numbers, but they said that they brought in almost $7 million in revenue since the program began in Macon-Bibb County. And then they also say later in the story that they brought in $5.6 million. So either way,
these
it's
companies
above $5 million.
Companies keep a big chunk of it too.
Yeah, they get a commission.
They make a lot of money. And yeah, there's just some officers sitting there just rubber stamping all of this, and off it goes.
That's awesome.
Dale Washburn is a patriot.
Yes.
And
no,
I just love him. I love him for this and for taking this on. It's not necessarily popular among legislators to be cutting local sources of revenue like this, but I am so excited that he brought this bill.
if they want to raise revenue, do it the old-fashioned way. Don't do stuff like this.
Right.
Pussies.
When we get back on the other side of the break, those of you who are listening for the Colton Moore story, it's going to be in the next segment. I promise, but let me pay some bills real quick.
You need to do like the old TV show. Let's take a break, and guys, we come back. Let's talk about Colton Moore.
Yeah, it'll be, well, maybe not immediately, but it'll be in the segment.
Then
It'll be in the
have
segment.
house
Not
band,
immediately. It'll be in the next segment.
Yeah, it'll be in the next segment. So
Promise.
just
Love you.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
Peach Pundit podcast, it has a partner-level Patreon, and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, which is a fantastic organization, they want you to know that they're working to keep the tax cuts from 2017 under President Trump in place. They led to an economic boom that featured job growth, wage growth, and low inflation. Unless Congress acts by the end of the year, those tax cuts will expire, and Americans will see their taxes go up. How much? $1,500 a year for the average family of four. That's unacceptable. Americans continue struggling with the effects of Bidenomics. Higher prices costing us $12,000 more a year on average, sky-high interest rates, and stagnant wages. The last thing we need is a bigger tax bill. Doing nothing isn't an option, and the clock is ticking. Tell Congress to act now. You can learn more about this effort by Americans for Prosperity by visiting the website protectprosperity.com. Thank you again to our friends at Americans for Prosperity and all of our Patreons for supporting Peach Pundit the podcast. If you too would like to voluntarily be a Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/Peach Pundit and sign up for one of our tiers. Today, we'll add you to the people who rock, who we honor every single podcast.
So, as we mentioned, Colton Moore is going to be discussed in this segment. But before we get there, I alerted Scott and Buzz to some stuff that came out. So this week is an important week for me in terms of my second job, because the Congressional Budget Office is releasing its updated projections for the 10-year budget window probably tomorrow afternoon. There was another report that I was keeping my eye on. They just gave a mid-January time frame, not a specific date. The budget report's a specific date, but they went ahead and released it on Monday. It's the demographic outlook. And what this does is provides projections on America's demographics over the course of the next 30 years. Now, there's degrees of uncertainty there, but you can make reasonable guesses or projections based on current trends. the reason I wanted to discuss this is because we brought this up on the podcast a few times over the course of the past, I don't know, how long have we been doing this now? Almost 3 years?
It's been a long time.
Yeah. Like I'm tired of seeing you guys almost every single week. I don't mean that, but so
we know you love us.
I mean, sometimes. So in September of 2020, the CBO released an estimate that we would have more deaths than births amongst the native population of the United States in 2044. The next release came out a couple years later. They revised it up, 2043. More deaths. Last year, they released another demographic report that said we would have more deaths than births amongst the native population in 2040. So, that's a substantial revision. Well, the report released on Monday shows that we will have more deaths than births amongst the native population in the United States in 2033. That is a 7-year downward revision. I'm looking at that, and the only population growth will come from immigration, net immigration, and the projections of net immigration have been revised downward. So I'm looking at that, and knowing the budget outlook is coming tomorrow, knowing that the budget deficit for the first quarter of FY 2025 is already $710 billion. Keep in mind, it was 1.9 last year. We're getting pretty close to that. Not pretty close to that, but we're going to be pretty close to that before we know it. I mean, I don't think and we're not even considering action taken on the California disaster relief or anything else that could come up in terms of emergency relief. My guess is we're looking at a budget deficit this year of $2.5 trillion. And it's only going to get worse from there on out, especially when you have an aging society with fewer people who are going to be available to work. The population projection change between the last report and this report. In 2055, the CBO is projecting 11 million fewer Americans. That's mind-blowing. And I know we talk about immigration. I want a robust legal immigration system. Scott and Buzz, we talk about this issue. I've never gotten the impression that Scott and Buzz are immigration restrictionists. But modern economies thrive on one thing and one thing alone: productivity. Productivity is what drives innovation. It's what drives investment. It's what drives opportunity. And the thing that keeps me up at night, other than the death spiral that is our fiscal house, is the opportunities that are going to be available to Reagan as she gets older. We haven't heard Reagan in a while. She doesn't pop up here as much when we're podcasting, but she's as adorable as ever. And I know that she's not going to have as many opportunities that her mom and I had when she's in her late teens and early 20s, even after she graduates from college. So guys, I put this to you, hopefully not having put too many words in your mouths. What's your initial reaction to that news? Yeah, Buzz, I'll go with you first because screw Scott.
Yeah, well, I recently read a book by Tim Carney. He set out to try to figure out why is the birth rate declining. It's not just in America; it's all over the all over the developed world. This is happening. Yep. Europe. Japan has been facing this for a long time. But what are the causes of that? And he comes up with several of them. Fear of the economy is, the cost is, it's one of them, no doubt about it. It's more expensive to have kids now and to raise a kid than it used to be. But there's a lot of other things. And his book, by the way, is called Family Unfriendly. And he talks about a whole just different things that have happened in our society that have contributed to it. He talks about things even as the design of neighborhoods and the design of apartment complexes. There's no shared space where where young couples can meet each other. And when you have this kind of social network, oh, hey, I need to run out. Can my neighbor watch my kid for a little bit while I go do this? It's harder to do now. And we don't live, for many of us, don't live as close to other family members as we used to that could serve as babysitters and caretakers and that sort of thing. All of those things mixed together. Environmental catastrophism, you hear. If you look on Twitter or any social media, that is definitely a factor. And the "don't cramp my style" is definitely part of it too. So it's a whole big thing. And large part, for a while, the right focused on, look at Viktor Orban in Hungary. He's doing all this wonderful stuff. He's going to turn their birth rate around. It hadn't worked.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't worked anywhere it's been tried.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know that as far as the birth rate goes, I think there's some things that governments can do. And Carney talks a little bit about that, making it easier, making it cheaper for a couple to decide, all right, the wife is going to stay home for a little bit of time as she has a baby and starts that child's life off. That's important. Making it easier for dads to stay home at various extended points of time throughout the child's life is very important. So family leave is something that she's like. So there's policies that the government can do, but basically the problem for the birth rate, at least, is our society just doesn't value place a high value on having kids like it used to, and that I don't know how to fix that. That's a societal problem. But Jason, the answer to this, as you said, and I heard a presentation about 2 years ago now from the Atlanta Regional Commission about this, about the only country, if I remember correctly, in this presentation that's really going to grow in population is Ghana. They're going to become this massive big country because they're having kids like crazy over there. But so, yeah, a sensible legal immigration policy is going to be more important now than ever.
Scott, one of the things, because I'm in the process of I was writing a piece for the Independent Center it was more about H-1B visas than anything else. Well, that's how it started, at least. And then these statistics came out. So I decided to tack on a large section about that. But one of the things I mentioned was specifically the financial incentives that some countries, including Hungary and Viktor Orban, the wannabe authoritarian president or prime minister, president of Hungary. So, and who the right, for some reason, loves. But what I write in this forthcoming piece, is even if the financial incentives did work and were implemented in the United States, it would take years, perhaps even decades, for the increase in fertility rates amongst the native-born population to correspond to more people available to work. There's also a cost associated with financial incentives, regardless of how they're constructed, which would either be a shift in the tax burden or a direct cost to taxpayers through tax credits or actual outlays from the federal government. Whereas, like, modernizing America's immigration system is, yes, there would be some cost there because you're opening up through legal processes, either through specifically pathways to citizenship or better, easier pathways to citizenship, or some H-1B visas or work visas and so on, temporary or not. There's more taxes being paid, and therefore there's a deficit reduction that takes place. So I don't know if you agree with that. I would rather just have your reaction.
Here's my reaction to everything you said, and allow me to be a bit contrarian with my co-hosts here. The more deaths than births of the native population, the replacement rate, is the most alarming part of this for me. And I'm not looking at immigration to be the solution to that. If there are problems within our current structure, whether it's the tax incentives, the cost of living, housing, student loan debt, all the financial decisions that go into having a child or raising it, or adding to your family if you already have children or a child. My family, we made a decision to stop at 2 because of the cost. That's bottom line. It's so expensive to rear a child into adulthood appropriately in modern American culture. In our society, higher education is required for them to be on a level playing field in the marketplace for jobs. And that is astronomically expensive for a family like ours. We do not come from money. I was raised in a 2-room shack in Enterprise, Florida. I had to walk 30 yards to get to the bathroom. That's where we came from. And so when we decided to I don't have family money to draw on. I don't have generational wealth. Everything that we have, I've had to earn it for our family. And I would love to have had a third child, but it was just not financially possible for us. And so we just couldn't. And I think what we're missing in this conversation is trying to figure out why. And we're not going to identify all the reasons why people are deciding not to have kids here on this podcast. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think that needs to be addressed, because even if you're bringing people in legally and under a reformed, more perfect working immigration system, the people who come here are going to be dealing with the same cost of living issues that families like ours are. And until we address those, I don't know that really fixes it. Like, we have to do something to make living in America less expensive.
No, that's certainly true, and no argument there. I do want to note, because we we texted about this on Peach Pundit, the text thread earlier in the week. And I did note from looking at the fertility rate, which is what the CBO focuses on. So it's the number of children per woman, or births, I should say births per woman. Right. And the fertility rate is projected to be 1.6 children per woman. It's projected to be that throughout the 30 years that CBO looked at. And that's the way it was. That was the rate in 2023, 2024, and that's how it's going to be. The replacement rate, which is the number of children per woman needed for society just to replace it itself, is 2.1. We haven't had a fertility rate of 2.1 since 2008. And you notice a correlation, and I'm not saying it's causation, but I am saying it's correlation. Coming out of the 70s, we had a fertility rate of 1.8. And it remained that between 1.8 and 1.9 until 1988. 1989, it hits 2, goes up to 2.1. And, you had a really good economy in the 90s and then the early 2000s. And then you had the Great Recession that hit in late 2007, early 2008. And that's where you start knowing fertility rates start to collapse. So affordability, a good economy is absolutely key. But you can't have those things under some of the conditions. And I remember when I was at the Capitals game, I went to see the Washington Capitals this week. And I, by the way, bought a little jersey, bought me a jersey that has my last name on it in 00, because why not? The NHL keeps taking my Atlanta teams away. But you notice that, and you say, man, and I said to someone, the days of 3% economic growth are gone. They're long gone. We're not going to see that again until things start to change. And that's because of various different reasons we're not going to get into here. But yeah, there's a lot that has to change. Scott's points are well taken and not wrong. We have a lot of problems in the United States that we got to fix, and it's got to go past a four-word tagline. There's got to be actual policy involved in this that addresses these problems. And yes, part of it is increasing legal immigration, not decreasing. Would you guys agree?
Most of the Republicans that I know would say legal immigration is a goal that they'd like to see. And I've heard some rumors out of D.C. that it may be among the first actual pieces of legislation once President Trump is sworn in. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And so we'll continue to watch it. But a lot of what you're alarmed about with the CBO, I share your alarm. And I just wish that the underlying issues can be addressed somehow as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's just it can't be maintaining or restricting immigration. It has to be boosting immigration, because that's you look at if you compare the JOLTS survey, which is the number of job openings we have in the United States compared to the people who are actively seeking work for November 2024, which is the last month for which we have data. 950,000 more job openings than people seeking work. And that's been the trend, with the exception of the pandemic years. That was the trend before the pandemic.
You would think would drive wage growth, because there's a larger demand for workers. And you would think that...
You're right. But the affordability issues have denied a lot of people that mobility to move around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. For me to sell my house right now with the current economic climate, interest rates, and go move someplace else after having been here for 20 years, it would be a massive financial mistake.
And with the same with the 10-year Treasury hovering around 5%, or the 5% yield, and mortgage interest rates hovering around 7%, and that's not going to let up anytime soon, which is my concern about tomorrow's report, which I'm sure I'll want to discuss next week. Hopefully we'll make it a little bit more fascinating and interesting once I talk about how truly screwed we are. So for what you folks have all been waiting for, drama queen, the senator from Northwest Georgia, the disgraced senator from Northwest Georgia. Stop sending him back. It's like, just stop. Like, the guy's just an asshole. Stop sending him back.
Are we talking about Senator Dolezal or Senator Moore?
Moore.
I'm kidding, Greg. Don't take that as a joke, Greg, because you never said. Look, there's a reason why this is on this part of the agenda, right? Everything that we just talked about, that's important stuff. It's really important stuff. I intentionally put this later in the agenda, not to tease you and get you listening, but to hope that you would listen to all the policy stuff that we just discussed over the last 45 plus minutes. And that you would understand that that's really what's important about what's happening at the legislature. There are a lot of people right now really fired up over what happened today, and we'll go into it and give you the complete details. But if you're one of those people who are listening to this podcast because you're outraged over what happened with Colton Moore today, what are you really paying attention to legislature for? Did you know that the Republicans in the House and the governor was talking about tax rebates upwards of $1 billion? Did you know that school safety was the number one issue for the Speaker of the House? Did you know that the Lieutenant Governor has only issued one issue on his agenda so far? I expect there will be more. And it was girls' sports. Did you know any of that stuff? Because that's what's going to actually happen this legislative session. So for those who don't know, last year, we talked about this at length. Colton Moore, state senator from Northwest Georgia, former House colleague of mine. I think you served with him too, didn't you, Buzz? Or did he come in just after you?
I can't remember.
Yeah. So Representative Moore is a young guy, and he has a showman flair. And he was kicked out last year. And I saw some stuff on social media today falsely claiming why he was kicked out of the majority caucus in the Senate. And before I go any further, I want you to know that I'm likely going to piss off everybody in what I have to say about Colton Moore during this segment. I'm going to piss off everybody. I know I am. So let's just get that out of the way and recognize it right away. But last year, he was kicked out. And there were people saying, oh, he was kicked out because he wanted to go after Fani Willis and nobody else would. No, that wasn't why he was kicked out. He was kicked out because he was deemed to be a danger to his colleagues. And what do I mean by that? There was an instance when the Senate Majority Caucus Republicans decided to go into a closed-door private meeting. Everybody leave your cell phones outside the room. There can be no contact with anybody, no recording devices. They are going to hammer out. They're going to have a family meeting. And they were going to hammer out some stuff. And within 30 minutes of that meeting starting, Senator Bo Hatchett's wife heard a knock on the door at their home 300 miles away. And at the door was a Colton Moore supporter there to address concerns they had about Senator Hatchett, who Senator Moore knew wasn't there and was with him in that room without his cell phone. So his wife starts calling Senator Hatchett, frantically trying to get a hold of him, and is not able to. It was a terrifying moment for that family. There were other instances where he called out specific members of his own party in the Senate, and it led to death threats for members. And throughout all of this, Senator Moore never showed an iota of concern or care for his colleagues. And that is the reason why Senator Moore was booted. He was considered dangerous, and he was no longer allowed to caucus with the Republicans in the Senate because of that. Now, if you have an inflated sense of right and wrong like I do, I hope you're pretty outraged with Senator Moore about that behavior, because that's what he did. And that's what earned him the right to get booted out. And this story starts several years ago in 2019 when David Ralston had a scandal. And that part of that scandal found yours truly near the very tip of the spear on the effort to address and bring justice for this. I am one of the 12 representatives who signed onto a resolution asking for David Ralston to resign because of his abuse of legislative leave, a problem that was documented independently by a retired FBI agent named Derek Somerville, who went to courthouses in Blue Ridge and in Cherokee and in Pickens County, and found that there were hundreds and hundreds more of these instances where he used legislative leave to keep his clients from going inside of a courtroom. And some of those cases are pretty grotesque. And it's well documented. Colton Moore was also a signer on that resolution along with me. And so in that way, we at the time were allies. Last year, after the passing of David Ralston, you have to understand, David Ralston has a lot of fans. He has a lot of family. He has a lot of friends, deep, meaningful relationships who are still holding the levers of power throughout the state. And so there was a particular day at the Capitol last year where the family of David Ralston came because the House and the Senate were both doing different activities to recognize and honor him. In the Senate, there was a resolution to name a building on the University of North Georgia campus after David Ralston. In the House, they were unveiling his official portrait, which now hangs outside of the House chambers. And regardless of the legislative leave thing, as is the case with all public figures, some people do some really great things, and almost everybody does some really great things and some really bad things. And it just wasn't the right day to bring it up. You had the family there, and when Colton Moore went to the well to talk about David Ralston and his use of legislative leave, here's the thing that might piss off some of my friends, right? What Colton Moore said in the well of the Senate that day, there's not a single inaccurate thing that he said. It was completely true. All of it. It was completely true. He was asked to leave the well by the lieutenant governor because the lieutenant governor told him at the time, this is not the time or place for that conversation. And so, fast forward 30 minutes from that, and John Burns informed the House that he was banning Colton Moore from the House chambers indefinitely. And today was the state of the state address. Colton Moore had indicated that he was going to attend. He was told that if he tried, there would be consequences. But if he wanted to attend, he had one thing he had to do. He had to apologize. And he refused to do so. Now, if I was in Colton Moore's circle, I'm not even close. But if I was in his circle, I would have advised him to say, ladies and gentlemen, arise today to offer an apology for choosing that time and place to say the words that I said. I recognize that David Ralston has family who love him. I recognize he has friends who love him. And I was insensitive to mention it on that day. However, everything I said was factual. And I look forward to the day when we can have a more robust conversation about the complete and total legacy of David Ralston, the good and the bad. And I hope to be part of that conversation. And had he done that, I think it would have shown that he was thoughtful. I think it would have shown that he'd grown as a person. I think it would have shown, well, I think it would have potentially painted anybody who disagreed with him on the facts into a corner, because he did apologize for the most egregious thing, which is this guy had recently passed away. It's just not the right time to say this. And I say this as a guy who signed that resolution. And I recognize, hey, I spent like a lot of my political career got wrapped up into that. It hurts today to talk about it, but he passed away. It's kind of moot at this point. And we lost the debate at the time. We could only get 12 of us to sign the stupid resolution. And everybody that didn't sign it has either decided to move on or they got reelected since then. Everybody knew what was going on. We lost the debate. We lost. Is it a good feeling? No. Is it the right one? I don't feel like it is. But I have to move on. There are important issues that need to be worked on. And so today, Colton Moore shows up and he tries to enter the House chamber for this joint session. No votes are being taken. The governor is giving his State of the State address where he's laying out his budget priorities for this legislative session. And he was denied entrance because he hadn't apologized. He was given the opportunity to, and he chose not to. And he tried to forcefully walk into the chamber. He had his arms to his side, but he was trying to forcefully enter the chamber. And they had a bunch of state patrolmen there. At one point, a staffer from the speaker's office got engaged in a tussle where he was trying to prevent him from entering the room. They ended up in sort of a hug. And there was an instance when Senator Moore fell to the ground. I will tell you, again, I'm going to make everybody mad. If you're a big Colton Moore fan, he flopped like a LeBron James. He looked like a European soccer player faking an injury. That's what it looked like to me. I'm just giving you my take, right? I watched the video 6 or 7 times. It just
if I can interject here real quick, Scott.
He just fell out.
If I could interject real quick here, Scott, he's got now a video that he released a couple hours ago. He's in the hospital. So I don't know. I haven't listened to the audio because we're here podcasting, but he flopped so hard that he sent himself to the hospital.
Yeah. Colton Moore is saying that his rights under Article 3, Section 4 of the Georgia Constitution were denied. That part of the state constitution says the members of both houses shall be free from arrest during sessions of the General Assembly or committee meetings thereof, and in going thereto or returning therefrom, except for treason, felony, or breach of the peace. No member shall be liable to answer at any place for anything spoken in either house or in any committee meeting of either house. He also apparently said he has more authority than the doorkeeper of the house, which that strikes me as a very "do you know who I am" statement, which I don't really have much regard for. Either way, Colton Moore, and it's funny, while you were talking, Scott, the people I stay with when I go up to DC, the married couple, Rob and Nikki, Rob texted me. He's like, so Colton Moore got himself arrested today? And these people live in, Reston, Virginia, and they're asking me about this up near DC.
Oh,
and they're asking me and he's asking me about this. And I was like, look, he did a stupid, which is pretty much what he
DC
does.
Drano and Cat Turd are all over this, so it's out there.
No, well, because credible sources of information and not highly hyperpartisan at all. Buzz, I mean, it's FAFO, man. It's FAFO. It's F around and find out.
I think it was intentional.
Oh,
it's
yeah, no
100%
doubt about it.
He
Yeah.
orchestrated this whole thing.
If
He
the Freedom
wanted to be
Caucus-
arrested.
The Georgia Freedom Caucus was tweeting yesterday, "You better let him in. We have lawyers ready to go." So they're geared up for a fight, and they got one.
Which lawyers? The same ones who represented the
Tucson
I guess
County.
We'll
Yeah.
find out. We'll find
Well,
out.
yeah, I guess
And
we'll find out.
fundraising plea. I've already got a fundraising plea from
How long
the
did
National Freedom Caucus. Andy Roth email. He's arrested. We got to help out here.
Here's how you know it was completely orchestrated and choreographed by the Freedom Caucus, because within an hour they were sending out the fundraising plea email.
Yep.
And it was designed to do that. That was the reason. The real reason this happened was for that.
Well, it's the same reason the Georgia Republican Party did what they did against Duncan. We saw that earlier this week, Buzz.
Yeah. Oh,
With
yeah. I got the
with their
fundraising
emails.
email.
Yeah, it
Yes.
was a fundraising email. We kicked out Jeff Duncan. Give us money.
Yeah.
And by the way, the
that's why I
lieutenant
have
the lieutenant governor who told I guess it wasn't Jeff Duncan. It would have been Burt Jones, wouldn't it? Who told Colton to shut up? I guess it would have been Burt Jones.
It was Burt Jones. Yes.
Yeah.
So Burt Jones did release a statement afterwards saying that as a member of the Senate, he's entitled to attend joint sessions. This is an interesting question for our constitutional scholars who listen, because this is fascinating. It's a joint session, and during House rules, under House rules during a House session, the House gets to decide who gets admitted to the floor while it's in session. Nobody else gets to decide that. The House does. So, but it's a joint session. Is there a constitutional requirement or not? I think it could be argued either way, whether or not he has the right to be there. However, the constitutional thing is about on your way to legislative business, like doing votes, is the way I interpret that. Mm-hmm. There is no vote in a joint session. It's a speech. You can listen to it. Most of us who were paying attention were in the hallway watching the screen when when the governor was speaking. So that's a question. The constitutional provision allows for an exception to arrest a legislator during session for breach of the peace. I think if anybody watches the video of Colton Moore's behavior trying to enter the chamber, that could easily be justified under breach of the peace. He was not being professional. He was not being peaceful. He was making a lot of noise. He raised his voice, and it was an act of force. He didn't lay hands, but he was using his body in a way to wedge himself into the door past people who were trying to physically just say, don't come this way. And it led to him falling down. He is now, in my opinion, the Republican version of Park Cannon, combined with a European soccer player.
Park Cannon, you'll remember, was banging on the door as Governor Kemp was signing a piece of legislation she didn't like. She was banging on the door and trying to enter through the door of and got
into
herself
the governor's
arrested.
office.
So
clearly a breach of the peace.
Yes.
So
right?
one of our friends, Nathan Smith, did post that a senator has told him that the rule does not apply during joint sessions. So that seems to reflect what the lieutenant governor said. And I do generally agree with the statement that this is kind of like making a martyr out of Colton Moore. Because the end result of this was going to be, this was for publicity purposes. This is why he did this. This was planned. And those of us who have been around politics long enough know that was the case. And plus, it just doesn't take rocket science to figure it out. But this is the thing. The people who live in his district even whether specifically not just on regular legislation that comes up, local legislation, the 53rd District, they effectively have no representation in the Georgia Senate. The man's been kicked out of his caucus. He's not allowed in the House. He can't talk to representatives on the floor of the House about his bills. He can talk to him in other areas, but
I doubt he ever gets a bill out of the Senate. I mean,
no. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, you talk about
something else there too.
Scott, you talk about the circle he has. The circle he has, I'm sure that he has a lot of fans amongst the activist class of the Georgia Republican Party who absolutely adore him and think he walks on water. But we have established on this podcast before, and we'll continue to establish it. The activist class of the Georgia Republican Party doesn't reflect the primary voter. More so, it doesn't reflect everyday Georgians, and Colton Moore is not taken seriously by his colleagues at all.
You know what? This is an epic trolling by the Lieutenant Governor and the Senate, a committee on assignments. Colton Moore became a chairman of a committee. He is the chairman of the Interstate Cooperation Committee. And if you go look up on the Senate website and you click down to the committee members for Colton Moore and his Interstate Cooperation Committee, he's the only Republican on the committee. They gave him a committee of all Democrats. And rumor is that their plan is any bill introduced by Senator Moore will go to his own committee, where he will have to try to convince all the Democrats on his committee and no Republicans to move his bills. That is how epic of the trolling has been.
They might vote yes just to see how the Rules Committee reacts.
I mean, Colton Moore he's 31 years old. He's one of the youngest members of the Georgia General Assembly, but I think he's probably the youngest senator, or at least close to it, if not the youngest. You've been around you've been in the Georgia General Assembly as a House member and a state senator now for what, 8 years, 6 years?
Yeah, he was in the House.
I was looking just a minute ago.
Yeah, it's 4 years in the Senate. He did 2 years in the House.
Yeah.
So
with a 2-year break.
Yeah, 2 years in the House, ran for the Senate, lost to Jeff Mullis, primary Jeff Mullis, and then when 2 years later Mullis retired and he ran and won that open seat.
My guess is the only reason he's sticking around is because he's waiting for a congressional House district to open up, a U.S. House district to open up so he can run.
Marjorie Taylor Greens.
He's just going to slide right in. I mean,
he thinks he is, but he's going to have people coming out of the woodwork from Washington, D.C. The State Freedom Caucus Network ain't going to save you, dude. The House Freedom Fund's not going to save you.
Go tell Andy Roth that, because he's out there raising money off it.
So the New Georgia Project, speaking of Colton Moore style FAFOing, has FAFO'd. They have been fined $300,000 for breaking campaign finance laws. This is the pro Stacey Abrams group that and this
led by Raphael Warnock.
That that they admitted to 16 instances of illegal activity and a consent decree, and will pay a $300,000 fine. This is with the Georgia ethics, not federal campaign finance law. This is Georgia state finance law. But they illegally did election work for Abrams without disclosing their campaign contributions and spending. Yeah, that'll do it.
Not just a little bit of money. $4.2 million raised and spent $3.2 million to support Abrams and other candidates in the 2018 election cycle. Incredible. And they admitted wrongdoing. And this is the burying the lead. Yes, this was a group founded by Stacey Abrams, but led by Raphael Warnock, current U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock. They made those decisions.
This will put me in direct opposition to three-year Letterman, who wants to see a Kari Lake Stacey Abrams ticket for president. I hope Stacey Abrams does what Kari Lake did and say, I'm never running for office again. That would be, I think Georgia Democrats could probably agree with me on that. Just end it already.
I'm leaving. Stick around. Buzz and Scott, who you're here to hear, you listen to anyway. You don't give a shit what I have to say. I'm a free marketer, but I'm the crazy progressive when it comes to social issues. So but thank you, Ryan. I appreciate. We don't really care, but much love. You dick. Bye.
Bye, Jason. All right, listeners, stay tuned. I get asked, Buzz. I get asked all the time. Do you agree with everything that is written over there, Peach Pundit? And the obvious answer to me is, I think I've tried to make this obvious. No, I don't always agree. But that's the point. Like,
Right.
If I didn't want contributors that I disagree with contributing to Peach Pundit, I wouldn't have contributors.
Right.
It would just be me, and it would be scotturner.com instead of peachpundit.com. But it's Peach Pundit. It's designed to allow people the opportunity to disagree publicly and have a discussion about the different opinions that are published there. And the opinions belong only to the author. They do not belong necessarily to the publisher. It's the way it works. When you're a contributor to Peach Pundit, I give you a great deal of latitude and leeway. The rules are publish whatever you want as long as it's true and doesn't defame or libel anybody. To that end, there have been very limited instances when I have intervened on any of the posts that are published. Now, there have been a lot of times I have read stuff on Peach Pundit and say, well, I don't agree with that. And oftentimes when I have that sentiment, personally, I get a call from one of our elected officials under the Gold Dome or a bureaucrat that I'm friendly with, and they question me about my willingness to publish things that they know are not my position. And there were 2 posts this week. One kind of chapped me. It made me very frustrated and angry. One reason why it made me frustrated and angry is because the contributor is Scarlett Hawk. You can read the post. She has a very hard time as a foster parent in the foster care system here in Georgia. You can read all about it. She's written multiple posts about it, and I won't put any words into her mouth. You can read about it. But at the end of her post, she lambasted the people that I know are trying to fix her problems. People I know personally. And I got offended on their behalf. And so I made a public comment on one of her posts, which anybody can create an account to make comments on posts. And I told her to stop putting really incendiary motivations on the people who are really trying to help. Not just her, but every foster kid and family in Georgia. In Laura's post, there are a ton of really good ideas that the legislature should look into. But I know personally from my experience that when you actually write the words, that if you don't do these things, all you want is for kids to go to prison. You are just venting now. You've gone from being a constructive offer of feedback and some ideas to being incendiary. And there is no faster way to become irrelevant under the Gold Dome and to see your ideas vaporized into the ether that is nothing than to insult the people who are trying to help. You may not like that. You might not think that's fair. You might think that that's wrong, but it's the way it is. And I have friends who work at DFACS. I almost took a job in higher management at DFACS to try to help fix the problems. I turned it down. So it's not like I'm trying to protect a financial interest there of mine, but I was offered a very significant job in that agency. I'm more than slightly familiar with the challenges that agency faces trying to solve the problem that wasn't created by government or the people who work in DFACS. These problems were not created by the families who have broken down. Somebody made a bad choice. The kid needs to be protected. The government steps in. The government is not a family. It never can replicate the family environment. And so as a foster parent, you may have a lot of frustrations with that system. And you might think it's underfunded. And there are ways to make that argument in that case. And so I did that. And then another poster of ours, Eric Harrison, took issue with the fact that I took issue with what Laura wrote and doubled down, right? Those posts remain up. Do I agree with them? No, I don't. And as a matter of fact, I was really disappointed to see the doubling down on the rhetoric. And also lecturing conservatives on whether or not they're conservative because they have a specific stance on things like expanding Medicaid. And I'm really tired of certain talking points being used. One of those talking points points out that there are over 80 counties in Georgia that don't have an OBGYN. This is mentioned in Eric's post. I think this is one of the most misleading lefty talking points and justification for a lot of socialist policies around healthcare. And so I started doing some research. Yeah, there are 82 counties in Georgia that do not have an OBGYN. Those counties start with, alphabetically, here are a handful of them. Atkinson County, Georgia. Buzz, help me out here. How many people live in Atkinson County, Georgia, which has 0 OBGYNs?
Well, not many. I'm thinking in the single-digit thousands.
8,286.
Okay.
Do you think the next county will be above or below that? You have 50-50 chance of being right.
Below.
Baker County.
You mean
Yeah. Baker County's next. Will it be above or below 8,286?
below?
Below. 2,743 residents. This is male and female population, by the way. Keep that in mind. 2,743. The next is Bleckley County, above or below?
Well, below 8.
Above. 12,465.
Okay.
I'm going to skip down to one. Clay County, Georgia.
Below 8,000.
Ryan is in the chat, and he's nailing everyone. 2,853.
Remember, I'm from Gwinnett County. I have 8,000 people within, I can look out my window and see 8,000 people. So
Glasscock County, above and below.
Glasscock.
Oh, I'm
see,
stumping Ryan in the chat. He doesn't.
Yeah,
he said it's
yeah.
close. He's right. It is close. It's a trick. I'll remind you, Clay County at 2,853. Glasscock County has 2,954, so it's slightly above. That's the first one Ryan got wrong in the chat. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Tolliver County, 1,609 residents
Yeah.
in Tolliver County. We have more counties in Georgia, 159, than we should. And if you're going to use a metric like 82 counties in Georgia don't have OBGYN, well, let's start looking at some numbers. Let's talk about an apples-to-apples comparison with some other state. There are 3 other states that are similar to population size as Georgia. They are Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina. Do you know that when you account for the population down to just women, that we are comparable in the per capita number of OBGYNs statewide?
Yeah, that makes sense, Scott. I think a better way to look at that would be how far do folks have to drive do women have to drive to see a OBGYN? What's their access to it? And yeah, the county as you point out, it doesn't work. It breaks down when you get to rural Georgia, and rural North Carolina, rural Ohio, and et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And that's the point, is we're on par with other states of similar size. We have 980 OBGYNs in Georgia, according to the latest data that I was able to find.
And that's not to say, and I don't think you're saying this either, Scott, that there are not problems, massive problems,
Sure.
in the healthcare system.
Sure. But,
but expanded Medicare is not, it's become like this. Is there
It's
anything
the silver bullet.
is there anything that expanding Medicare won't fix? And that's, it's kind of, I'm not saying that is the view of Eric and Scarlett. I don't know, but that's certainly the talking point you hear from the Democrats who advocate for it.
Oh, yeah.
And they're advocating for it again today.
It's over-promising on a government solution to this problem, right? And so one of the metrics that's used to measure health outcomes in Georgia is infant mortality rate. And we're in the middle of the pack nationwide. But when you compare us to Georgia, when you compare Georgia to Michigan, North Carolina, and Ohio, the latest data I could find came from the CDC in 2022. And Georgia of the 4 states is the highest at 7.08. The next highest was Ohio at 6.9. So statistically insignificant difference between those two. Now, if you are drawing a chart of the country and you're drawing states in different colors, you're going to color Georgia a different color than Ohio, but statistically insignificant difference between Georgia and Ohio.
Yeah.
You drop down to North Carolina, their infant mortality rate is 6.6 per 1,000 live births, and Michigan comes in at 6.4. We have a comparable number of OBGYNs per capita. Now, I will grant you this. They are not evenly dispersed. We demonstrated that by talking about population data of the counties.
Right.
But our infant mortality rate, which is considered fairly high, is comparable to other states of similar size, population-wise. And so we're not talking about this in terms of metrics that are fair. And I don't know how many counties are missing an OBGYN in Ohio. I don't know how many they are in North Carolina. I don't know how many there are in Michigan. But this is one thing I can tell you. Georgia has more counties than they do. And so you can't compare apples to apples using the number of counties as a metric for anything.
Yeah.
Anything. I don't care if it's the number of OBGYNs. I don't care if it's the number of roads. I don't care if it's the number of cows. You can't use, Georgia's so unique in our number of counties. It's way too many. And we have a very large rural patch of dirt here where people are not living. And what can you do as the government to put an OBGYN in Tolliver County, in Atkinson County, Baker County? What can you do? If you are coming out of med school and you're an OBGYN, are you going to go to a place that only has 3,000 people in it? That doesn't seem like a recipe for success. So, no, there are reasons why I disagree with some of the things that are posted on Peach Pundit, but especially if you are in the legislature and you see something that you disagree with, here's your invitation. I'll take this as an opportunity to offer this to anybody who's listening, really, frankly. You take issue, you can log in to Peach Pundit, you can have an anonymous account. We won't tell anybody who you are. Our anonymous account, I couldn't tell you who any of our anonymous accounts are. I have no idea who they are. But you can disagree right there. Go write a response. Talk about the reasons why you're right and the article is wrong. You're empowered to do that. And if you are elected and want to write a post as a guest post, or you want to become a permanent contributor to Peach Pundit, we have those opportunities as well. So all that to say, go look at the Peach Pundit, the blog, and you can see all this stuff. But Peach Pundit's always been a place, even before I created a login for the very first time under the old ownership. Always been a place of disagreement, and it's not a bad thing. It's not personal, but sometimes it does get emotional, especially when some of our contributors are writing about personal stuff. But I'm going to have to go on this thing constantly now, I think, to tell people they're going to write what they write. You can too. It's not my opinion. It's theirs. Don't hold me accountable for what other people think just because I own the site. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be a collaboration of ideas from everybody and different perspectives. So that's what I had to say about that.
Well, Scott, you're the publisher, the owner of this website, and you speak for all of us. I hope that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I hope that Scarlett and Eric continue to write about what they're going through, and as they try to work through this system, it's hard. Foster parenting is the foster care system is a mess, and that's not to point blame at Candace Brose, who I think is working very hard. And I know I was on one of the committees I was on when I served in the House was the committee that had oversight of DFACS, and it's a constant struggle. It's a hard job, and it's a hard thing to fix and get right. And there are not many places in the country that are getting it right. It's just an enormous problem. Mm-hmm. And so I feel for them. I feel for the people who work there. I feel for Eric and Scarlett, who I consider friends, and as they're trying to navigate through this and be the kind of people who help kids, which is what they're doing and what they're trying to do, and trying to do it well.
Yeah. So again, come be part of the conversation. If you've read these pieces and you wonder if that's Scott's position, I hope it's clear to you. And if you have your own position or you'd like to defend, we have the anonymous feature for a reason. You don't have to tell anybody who you are, but give us the perspective. Make sure that the community is more informed than it is today. Participate. And that's it. You have anything else, Buzz?
Nope. Just
Awesome.
I guess it's kind of cool. The national championship, college football national championship game is in our city on Monday night. 2 storied programs in Notre Dame and Ohio State. Should be a heck of a game. And it's
as a Georgia Tech guy, who are you voting for or rooting for? Are you with Rudy and Notre Dame, or was Rudy offsides?
Let me just say, Rudy was offsides. Okay, it's a great movie. I love that movie, but Rudy was offside. That's kind of a tech legend steeped in tech lore. Look, I'm for various reasons. I'm pulling for Notre Dame. It's not just necessarily because they're somewhat associated with the ACC in the sense that all their other sports are full members of the ACC and they play 5 football games. It's time that the SEC and the Big Ten are so powerful and are controlling so much of college sports. I think would be a good thing if a non-SEC and non-Big Ten won a championship this year. I think that'd be good.
Yeah.
And look, Marvin Freeman, I think is a heck of a football coach and done a tremendous job. He's there 3 years. When the previous coach left to go to LSU to say, I'm going there because I want a chance to win a championship. And here's the guy he left kind of in the lurch.
Yeah. Where's
playing
LSU
for
in this
one.
playoff? Did LSU even make? No, they didn't, did they?
No.
Oh, wow. I guess it just means more for less miles. Yeah, I don't know who I'm rooting for. I don't care. I love the fact that it's going to be settled on the field and it has been throughout the playoff. This college football playoff is perfect. If anybody changes it, I'll fight them. I love it. I love everything about it.
They might make some tweaks to the seating, and that's fine with me. That's okay. But I mentioned it last week. I love that the first round games were on college campuses. I think they should do kind of like the NFL. It should be home games all the way up until the championship game. And I know the Rose Bowl and all these people will be upset about that, but college football belongs on college campuses, and it's just the games it's just great atmospheres and stuff.
Yeah, most of the home teams won though, didn't they?
Sure, they were all favored.
Yeah.
So,
in that first round, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
All right, folks. People who rock are the people who voluntarily reach into their pocket to give us a little bit of change every month to keep the podcast and the blog running. You can join them. Head on over to patreon.com/Peach Pundit. There you will find different tiers. You can start out $5 a month. I mean, adjusted for inflation, that's like $1 from like 5 years ago. Throw us a couple bucks. Let us know that you love us. We'll let you know back. People who do that voluntarily are Tony West and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Ari Schaefer, Benjamin Hurst, Bill Werkheiser, Bo Brennan, Brett Harrell, Colin Martin, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, James Hall, John Vestal, Mike Buchert, Reed Powell, Rob Lee and our friends at Lee6 Media, Ron Daniels, Ryan Graham, Ryan Purvis, who is at our $10 level, which entitled him to watch the recording live. He gets extra content, pre and post roll, and can chat with us while we're recording. Shannon Ferguson, Stuart Wilkinson, and our anonymous contributor. Again, head on over to patreon.com/Peach Pundit. Sign up for one of those tiers. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Jason Pye, Buzz Brockway, and me, Scot Turner. We are Peach Pundit the podcast. All the music you hear is original, written and played, put together, arranged, and all the other artistic things you can say by Jason Pye. Catch us at 3 at Buzz Brockway and at Pye on Twitter. I guess Pye is a liberal. He's gone to Blue Sky. But the rest of us can still be found on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days.
I've got a little poll pinned on my Twitter account about who should I give money to?
Yeah, go tell Buzz who we should give money to. It's on his Twitter, at Buzz Brockway.
To advance conservative policy, not just which entity is going to do that.
Thanks for listening.